Hi friends, Cole here. Thank you for joining me. And today I wanted to share a bit about my story with how I came to yoga. A few of you may know, many of you may not, but I just wanted to share my journey through substance addiction into recovery with yoga. I mean, this has been the path that I have used to find my freedom. And that's really why I do what I do. So whenever I was young, I came from a very loving and supportive family. The only thing I can really think is that my parents they worked a lot, and they were both kind of introverts, and I was definitely extroverted. So I don't know if that kind of started this maybe kind of seeking outside maybe a little bit. But whenever I was 13, I had a really good childhood. I don't remember a lot about it. I played a lot of sports, I read a lot of books. Almost kind of like my life was black and white, but I didn't really know it. And whenever I was 13, I was over at a friend's house, and I think like her older brother and some friends were there, and the parents were out of town, and we were drinking. So that was the first time that I drank. And I remember so clearly, and you'll hear this with alcoholics and addicts, that they remember their first time incredibly clear, that I was laying in the pool on an inner tube, and I was drunk or buzzed, and I was looking up at the stars. There were so many stars out, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm gonna do this forever. It's like my life had turned into Technicolor, and I didn't even know that it was only in black and white prior. So when I drank, all of a sudden I felt completely connected to my body. Everything was vibrant. I felt like I found the golden ticket. Like, it's quite scary at 13 to say, I'm going to do this forever. And I think I even got sick that night. I'm pretty sure that I got sick later that night, but I don't remember that part. I remember the part that it was like, everything was amazing. And that's set the trajectory. Whenever I was probably a year into this, so 14 now, started kind of drinking where we could, smoking a little pot, some different things like that. And I was dating an older boy and sneaking out of the house. And we would go and drink and, smoke weed and do whatever. So I was sneaking out of the house, and we had sex in the back of his car. And I got pregnant the very first time I ever had sex. And it was traumatic. It was incredibly traumatic. I kind of blacked out a little bit over that. I don't remember a lot of it, but I remember there was a lot of shame and feeling bad. Like, it wasn't like I had done something, like made a choice that was bad. It was that I was bad. And, the school found out. My family wound up moving, like actually moving states, like kind of fresh start. And, I really felt just so much shame over that. Granted, I was already going to be an alcoholic. Like, I was already on that path, I know that. But then I added all this shame, which wasn't there before. This is a rough age anyhow, but. So for the rest of my high school years, I went to a couple different high schools. I was getting in trouble. They kept thinking they were giving me a fresh start, but right away you can find what you're looking for. Like, I, would hook up with the kids and stuff that were doing the same thing, and I was incredibly angry with my parents, especially my mother. So I kind of blamed her for all of this. And I just continued to get in trouble, sneaking out of the house. I think my father had to pick me up at many, many parties when, it was a mess. It was really a mess. And I wound up moving out of the house when I was about 17. And just continuing on, really quite severe, quite early. And I wound up moving to Colorado for whenever I was probably 19 or something. And I was going from living in winter resorts, like in the mountains, and then coming back and living in a summer resort in the summer. Both huge party towns. So they're both resort towns, and it's really easy in a resort town to hide alcoholism because everybody's drinking. You have Bloody Marys in the morning, mimosas in the morning, all of that is not a big deal. But that's really all that I was wanted to do. That's all I was thinking about. We were just partying all the time. It wasn't just like a weekend thing. It was, all the time. And probably not until even though I knew that I was really severe, I started doing cocaine and acid and ecstasy, the whole spiel. But I was still like having fun at that time. Still would go through a lot of pain with hangovers and withdrawals and things like that. But I was still, in my mind, I was still having fun. And it wasn't until I was probably 21 or 22 that I started shaking in the mornings. Like I started to realize, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. And I started drinking vodka in the morning. And then I realized like, oh, if I just hide it, like I knew then that it wasn't like, okay, like I shouldn't be doing that. So I was hiding it. But I realized that I would quit shaking, my headache would go away, and I would I would feel good again. So it's kind of like my golden ticket. Like, okay, I don't have to quit drinking. That drinking is not the problem. I just need to, you have this little formula. I'll just have a little bit in the morning and then I'll be fine. I ended up I'd already been to one rehab actually. Whenever I was in high school, I went to my first rehab. And I went to my second rehab, I think whenever I was 22 or 23. And that's when I really knew that I had an issue. And I didn't want to get sober. I was too young to be sober. Like everybody's partying. Everybody I knew was partying. Everybody's doing it. And I didn't want to get sober. I just kept thinking that I was maybe doing the wrong formula, or I somehow just ended up, I took too much, or somehow, ended up, whatever it wasn't me. I didn't have a problem. I was just ending up in a bad scenario. Got a couple DUIs, still, making stories around this as well, about bad luck, different things like this. Probably another rehab, probably about 7 in total. But when I was maybe 24, I went to a rehab and I took my first yoga class in a treatment center. In Santa Cruz, California. It was really beautiful. It was a glass, like a greenhouse. There were redwood trees everywhere, like the birds were chirping. Sunny, it was beautiful. And I was laying there on my yoga mat and I hated myself. I was laying there and I was shaking and I was detoxing and everything around me was so beautiful. Except this, like I could smell the alcohol coming out of my pores. I loathed myself. And the yoga, I was so disconnected from my body. So see, I started all of this because I felt connected. And it had turned into a poison for me. So when we started doing the yoga classes, we did it throughout the month that I was there. Even just moving my body, like take your right hand to your left knee, like all of these kind of simple things was connecting my mind and my body. And I was really feeling like, this was medicine. Another big takeaway was the teacher. Oh, and by the way, the teacher was, I don't remember her face. I wish I could find out. I need to do some research and find out who she was. I don't remember her face, but I remember her voice. It was so angelic. And I remember her saying that she was a heroin addict for a really long time. And I remember being like, what? Like, no way. I did not believe it. She couldn't be. She had it all together. And anyhow, I remember her telling us what Namaste meant. And I'd heard the word before, but I didn't really know what it meant. And the way that she explained it was that, my higher self sees your higher self. And I was like, huh? I didn't realize that I had a higher self, and I really didn't. I just thought I really thought I was a piece of shit. So this concept was like really big for me. And I took that with me. I remember saying to myself, if I ever get this drinking thing figured out, or if I ever decide to be sober, which I didn't want to be. I remember even thinking that, which I don't, like having to remind myself internally that wasn't what I wanted. But if I did, I was going to see about this yoga thing. So that really planted the seed. Now, granted, I drank on the plane home, just because that's what I did. And throughout the next several years, as things got progressively worse, several more treatments, a ton of hospitals, lots of detoxes, I incrementally and would go into yoga class. And I'd always feel really connected. And I would get on my mat and I would get in child's pose. And I would feel safe. And I'd feel really good, about myself. I always felt the teacher was talking right to me, like she knew. But I never quite felt connected. I felt like I had a secret. Like everyone in the yoga class were like good people, and I had this secret. Because remember the shame from when I was young, I felt that I was bad. Again, not that I had done something bad, that I was bad. Like I was fundamentally flawed. So I still, even in the classes and things like that, I felt ostracized. I was ostracizing myself. I was isolating myself. So this continues on. I could give you a zillion stories. One day I'll write a book. Crazy, really chaotic and dramatic. But towards the end, you could ask me, how's the drinking going? Or you could say, when's the last time have you been to a yoga class? And you would get the same answer of how I was doing. And my yoga mat became like my magic carpet, my safe haven. And I would feel so good, and I would start to feel so good that then I would go back and drink because I felt so good. I was a celebratory drinker. And I wasn't really making the correlation. But slowly the pendulum was swinging. And I was learning more about my body. I was learning more about, the philosophy, the way, the self-inquiry, asking myself questions that I didn't have the courage to ask myself prior. Not only to ask myself, but to truthfully answer. It was quite challenging and very difficult to look at things that you don't want to look at. It's much easier to ignore them. But the state that I was getting in it was so drastic. My family wasn't talking to me anymore. I had been, towards the end, had been kicked out of a sober living place that I was living in because I had hidden wine bottles all over the place. I had left my job. I was a massage therapist, left midway through a massage because I was shaking so bad and just quit my job. And in the very end was so desperate and so beat down and so disconnected from myself and hated myself so much. I really didn't care anymore. Started doing, injecting heroin, and it was bleak, really, really bleak. When I first started all of this, like I mentioned, I felt connected and whole. I felt like I was the best version of myself. It was really a medicine, and it was fun and it was beautiful. Everyone was laughing, the party scene, you see it in all the magazines, drinking and having fun. And that's really what it felt like. It felt really glamorous. And then in the end, it was dirty. I was staying in motel rooms, in drug dealers' houses, really, really dark. And I wound up having a stroke, an overdose. And when I came to, everyone had left me there. And when I came to, my brain was on fire. And it was so intense. I made my way back to a room that I had rented. It was across the street from a liquor store in Austin, Texas. Convenient. So normally whenever I was feeling so bad and so shut off and so withdrawn and with literally detoxing, what I would do is I had to drink more. Like the part of your brain in addiction, your brain is telling you that you are going to die if you do not get your drink or your drug, which in many cases it's true. But it always made me feel better. It always was able to ease me. If I could just get some more, I knew it was just creating more of a longevity, but I just couldn't go through the process of, the physical process. And this time though, I went to the liquor store, I got enough alcohol and wine. I couldn't drink hard liquor anymore because I had pancreatitis, so I had to drink wine. I got enough for several days because I knew I was just gonna have to lay down and sleep and medicate for several days. And I remember people telling me in rehabs and in meetings and things like that, that one day it just isn't gonna work anymore. And I never really knew what that meant because I was like, well, of course it'll work. I do enough that I'll make it work. And I sat there and I was drinking and I just kept drinking and it wasn't doing anything. I wasn't feeling any better. It was doing nothing. It was absolutely nothing was happening. And I was like, oh my God. What do I do then? And I remember this lady telling me, I was asking her at a rehab, I was having a really hard time at this place this last place I'd been sent to. I couldn't understand how I could do it or why I should do it. Everyone kept telling me you're gonna die. And I just couldn't wrap my mind around what would I do if I was sober? I had worn that mask for so long and hid behind that wall for so long that I was absolutely terrified. And I thought I would be a shell of a person. I would have no emotion. I didn't know what I would do with my life, which is crazy. But, remembering that I started at such a young age, I didn't know anything else. And I remember asking her, how did you do it? How did you finally quit? Still didn't really want to. I didn't think it was possible, but I was asking. And she told me that one day that she realized that she could be high or she could be happy. And even though the two things used to go together, that they were never ever going to go together again. And that once you realize that, it dissipates. So that day, when nothing was working for me anymore, no one was talking to me, I had no money, I was really stained, it just finally dawned on me, this is never gonna go together. People have been trying to tell me that for years. It was very obvious that those two things did not go together for me. But the addict is so in denial. Our brain has been completely hijacked. But it was I dropped into this surrender, oh my God. And I called the sober living house that I'd been kicked out of prior. And I'd never done this. I always ended up in rehab. I was out of money and they sent me there, or I was begged to go, or I got a DUI and had to go. I never asked to go. And anyway, I called this sober living house back and I said, I'm done. I need to come back. I don't have any money. And they let me come back. They had one bed that they let people come into for no money. And they told me to be there on Wednesday. And I think, it was Sunday or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm gonna make it until then. And I called them on Tuesday night and I said, I'm on my way over there, I will sleep on your couch. And they let me in. And the moment I walked in that door, just I felt safe. And then I went into a yoga studio that had 30 days free at Wanderlust in Austin. And so I signed up for the 30-day free trial or whatever. And I went in and I got on my mat in child's pose, a pose of surrender, and I lost my shit. I lost it. Ugly cry, temper tantrum, so full of fear and hope, because I landed back on my mat again. but fear because I knew I wasn't able to leave, that this was the only thing that was connecting me somehow. And I didn't know the whys, or I didn't care. It's just something was working for me there. And I just kept coming back, and I kept coming back, and I kept coming back, and I kept coming back. And about 6 months into it, I signed up for their yoga teacher training. And I did my training, and I just was on fire for this practice and everything I was learning about myself. And I was finally coming out and telling people as well. I was finally coming out and saying, you know, I'm in recovery, something I'd never said, or I don't drink anymore, because I was so ashamed of it. And I realized that nobody cared. Like, I was just so ashamed. I used to relapse just because somebody asked me if I wanted to drink. I wasn't able to say no. So I started to talk about it and started to be empowered by it rather than shameful for it. You know, the secrets that we keep us bound and shackled in shame. Being able to come out and speak to it was so much liberation in that. And it was there in Austin, Texas, that I met with Yoga TX and started teaching yoga videos there. I started teaching yoga videos. I very quickly, I'd always wanted to travel my whole life. That's always was my dream. I traveled around the country in my 20s. Every rehab I went to was in a different state. So it's like I'd go to a few festivals and ended up in rehab, a few festivals ended up in rehab. So I was on tour, but not the kind of travel I wanted to do. I wanted to travel, you know, internationally and see the world. So all within this year, I became a yoga teacher. I began filming yoga videos, and I started teaching Thai massage. I was a massage therapist, was invited to assistant teach in Bali, where I'm living now, about 4 years ago, and also doing some massage on some beautiful cruise ships as well. All of this was just, it was like the universe was just waiting for me to turn my head to the light. And it was like, here, like, Lord, please take this child. It's like I could have the bottle, or I could have the world. It's like I was really being shown that, and it just dissipated. It just went away from me. Like, this is really what I always wanted, to feel connected to my environment, to feel connected, you know, to myself through my practice, to the world through traveling. And I'm so grateful for that. So fast forward today, I'm living in Bali. You know, ever since the first trip that I took, I've been traveling ever since. Now I'm living in paradise. You know, a place that this Bali really opened up my heart. This is a majority sober community. The first time I came here, I was here for a month and nobody ever even offered me a drink. And there's dancing all over the place. I remember the first dance that I went to, I was like, these people are not sober. Like, there is no way they are. And that's the first time that I really lost myself in my body dancing and wasn't on anything, realizing that I could do it sober. So Bali has taught me so much. The community has taught me so much of a completely different way to live. And I just had my 5 years sober on August 26th. And I have no intention of stopping. And I'm sharing this with you just so you know a little bit more about me. And we all struggle with unhealthy behaviors and addictions in different forms. So mine was incredibly severe, substance addiction, but we have work addictions, love addictions, codependency. There's so many addiction to controlling things. So many different ways that we are not fully embodied in the present moment. So we use distraction. We use things outside of ourselves in order to somehow mask what doesn't feel good, what isn't working. So I'm really excited to start working more in this field. I've been teaching at treatment centers for a while now, and I was that teacher. I did go back and, you know, I'm teaching in treatment centers and stuff now, where the clients are like, you know, whenever I tell them that, you know, I used to be really severe, they're kind of like, huh, really? So like full circle there. I'm also teaching in a prison here in Bali, really wanting to give back some hope, give back some of my story. And I'm going to be creating a yoga and recovery video series and kind of an online program with lots of different self-inquiry, meditation, physical practice. And I'm just so excited. This has been my path from wounds to wisdom, and I couldn't have done it without this yoga practice, and I'm just forever grateful. And that is why I do what I do. That is why I'm so passionate about sharing with you all this amazing practice. We all come in for different reasons. Maybe it's a physical ailment, maybe it's, you know, a heartache or a loss of a loved one, or whatever it is that brings us to this path. There's so much. We get the medicine coming in from all angles. And just incredibly grateful. And I think that's all I have to say about it. Just wanted to share that with you. Please leave your comments, any questions you have for me. And yeah, thank you for your continued support in allowing me more opportunity to share myself, because the more that I can share, you know, the more stronger that I am in who I am, stronger I am in my sobriety and all of that jazz. So I really encourage you to stand up and speak out, you know, with your own challenges, with your own dilemmas, because the only thing that does is it frees you and it allows other people to also be able to stand up in their humanity. And then one by one, we all start standing, and there we are, seeing each other. Namaste.